Okay, first of all, before I get started, I know that in Norway this will make you laugh, but this week we are freezing here in Houston. Temperatures touched 0 degrees Celsius, and I'm realizing how dangerous it can be to drive around in a place where actually ice is something you only see in your drinks. So today I thought, let me stay home and record this video. And to start, I want to bring you back a few years, to the 50s. At that time, a Swedish engineer, Niels Bohlin, and I'm sure some of you know the story very well, joined Volvo, where his talents would soon lead to a groundbreaking invention. At that time, car accidents were a leading cause of death, and the lap seat belt, they were uncomfortable and not really useful, and so drivers didn't use them. In 1959, after years of tests, Niels developed the 3-point seatbelt, the one we know now. Volvo immediately introduced the design into their cars, and together with Niels, they decided to make the patent for the 3-point seatbelt open to other car manufacturers. Despite this, it took few decades to convince people that it could save their lives. When governments made it mandatory, I can tell you in Italy, we had people going around with white t-shirt with a black line in the middle, rather than wearing a seatbelt. And now you could not even imagine to drive around without. It's kind of uncomfortable, psychologically uncomfortable. Now, the bottom line here is that what starts off optional soon becomes a standard. If you are here in this HSE Forum, eager to hear about human performance, maybe it's because you start feeling uncomfortable you are not wearing your HP seatbelt. And in fact, if someone feels that understanding and implementing human performance is something like a choice, a mere possibility, another thing to do to appear doing something in health and safety, they might be pushed to think differently. And very soon. The core principle of human performance has been evolving for many decades. And actually, depending on where we start counting, even could be a century. And although they are nothing new in aviation, and I'll say in some cases in the oil and gas, we are now rediscovering them and achieving that critical mass in the industry that is laying the groundwork for a full application across companies and operations. And this is your moment to be at the forefront. Do you see what happened with AI, for example? 2 years ago, AI sounded more like a science fiction to most. Then suddenly, OpenAI released GPT-4 and ChatGPT went mainstream. Now every company talks about AI. You know this. Everyone has AI something to show and to sell. This is happening in human performance too. And the fact you are spending your precious time listening to me through this video, that's proof. So if you're already on the journey, great. Otherwise, be prepared. Have a well-crafted plan. Fail fast if needed. I can tell you, I failed and I'll learn as I failed a lot. Build the foundation. Make sure your top executive understand where you want to go and agree, of course, and make also sure that your HSE team are competent. And please, don't be the one that just rebrand their existing safety program straight away as human performance. It doesn't work like that. You can't wear a white t-shirt with a black line in the middle, right? Before crashing. Now, what I can offer here, is to share with you 3 things that I didn't see coming when I've been implementing human performance. No big deal. Just 3 things you need to keep in mind. First one, you need a practical action for your organization to focus on. I know we talk a lot about the principle, but the principles don't really tell you what to do. I assume you're going to train your whole company on the principle, for example. Then what? That's fundamental, right? It's important leaders learn about the principle, start changing their mindset on why people make mistakes, how the contest influences their choices, how they influence the contest. And of course, how critical to welcome bad news. And leaders get it. One of the first time I talked about HOP and the 5 principle to a very senior leader, he laughed at it. And then he came back and asked, so what do you want me to do, Lamberto? What is that leading indicator, that thing that you will be asking them to do? Think about it. With behavioral-based safety, you would ask to report observation. You would measure them. You would count safe and unsafe behaviors, condition. Some of us would go further and monitor how many observation reviews happen in a year, the number of leaders' feedback, and so on. Any new on performance? Now, of course, you can look at CRM metrics, checklist effectiveness, but what are you going to ask leaders to do differently? Apart not cursing people when they get injured, right? So what I found useful is to quote the great Todd Conklin. In his book, Pre-Accident Investigation, he says, everything you do to increase your organization's ability to learn makes your organization safer. So, what I ask our leaders to do is to learn from normal work. Sponsor learning teams, conduct a walkthrough, talk through, facilitate a session of finding the next incident. I tell them, go and look for those things where your idea of work and the worker's idea of work is different. Second thing, the amount of efforts we need to turn an organization's attention to its own systemic flows. It's all ever bigger than an organization needs to blame a single worker for getting injured. I call this the blaming disparity law. Blaming people for doing something wrong requires very little effort. It's the principle of scapegoating, the confirmation bias, the attribute bias. Let me tell you a little story. A few years ago, I was attending an incident review. Those reviews with many people attending or chaired by someone very senior, and where normally a frontline supervisor feels the heat for having had one of his people injured. So the shop supervisor recounts the incident. Basically, he mostly reads the slides, his English not really clear, a bit the accent a bit, maybe he was scared. And he started getting questions, right? Leading questions. Those questions that don't even aim at blaming the injured employee, but rather at gauging if the supervisor himself is a tough guy and holds his people accountable. And eventually, his more senior manager jumps in and highlighting that the employee wasn't wearing the right gloves, and he put his hands where nobody of sound mind would have taken the risk, right, while redressing that type of tool. And he added that the people around him actually did not stop work. Well, with this introduction, what do you think the corrective action would be? Of course, they had already been completed. Stop work, refresh training for all employees, and disciplinary action for the injured one. We need to keep in mind that walking an organization through the journey of accepting that people make mistakes, and that rather than blaming them, we should understand how making this mistake less likely, and when they happen, less catastrophic. That requires much more energy. And this is the reason why warning letters are often ready even before an incident investigation is completed. The blame cycle is quick, it turns fast, and has an incredible momentum. The trust cycle instead, that's a lot of friction. It's slow, it can be stopped with very little effort. You need believers, you need a strong culture, you need a psychologically safe work environment. Believing someone got it wrong is easy and satisfying. Oh, we have the solution. Here's the problem and that's the solution. But digging deeper in the system, understanding how the system failed the worker, that takes time. And I would say often, maybe always, the solution is much more complex than writing a warning letter. But here is an important point. The first communication around an incident has a big impact on how we imagine things happen and what we believe. Changing perspective, especially when the new problem is deeper and more complex, and demonstrating, of course, that things are different than previously communicated is tough. So, bottom line, on top of the injured people, you need to protect the incident itself. When something happened, there might be pressure to reveal the who and the why the failure, right? The pressure increases with the severity of the incident. Hold tight. Make sure you are the one to communicate as soon as possible when something didn't go as planned. Start with stating how the employee involved are doing, highlight how early is to identify the causes, and provide details on how and if the operation are continuing safely. And if you get asked those leading loaded questions, those questions that will guide you to either confirm or expose a failure in following a rule or mistake, respond that while the incident looks simple, there are multiple factors at play and it's important to consider the full context, right? Remember the blaming disparity law. The amount of efforts needed to turn an organization's attention to its own flaws is much bigger than to blame a single worker. And this leads me to the third point. In the accountability circus, every job is a balancing act. Your human performance program will thrive when there is a balance between two seemingly opposite approaches. Can you hold your people accountable while making allowance for their limits too? You need to demand your people their best, yes, but you need to stay open and understanding on the challenge they face. Being willing to hold people accountable for risk that is reasonably easier to leave them managing, while having a balanced perspective when it's unreasonably dangerous to expect people to be perfect at all times. Of course, let's face it, every company has its share of hiring missteps, right? We all have encountered individuals who don't share our safety value, don't align with the company culture, who simply, don't pull their weight alongside the rest of the team. But hey, you got an HR department, right? However, let's be honest, in most cases, we hire good people. People who bring their skill, their passion, their drive. We onboard them, we train them, and we ensure they have all resources and the support they need to succeed. And then we sit back and relax, because we know how to hold people accountable, isn't it? And often translating to, we know how to point fingers and assign blame. But here's the truth. Waiting for mistakes to happen is like waiting for exception to prove the rule. Thinking that when something goes wrong is only because someone decided to do it wrong is a belief that bad things only happen to bad people. But I can tell you, a bad system will beat a good person every time. Now, of course, when something goes wrong, it's easy to say, if only the employee had made a better decision, we had a better outcome. Of course. If you're not driving, you cannot die in a car accident. With hindsight, it's easy to point fingers to the one that made the final choice. But how many people in your organization is being influenced to take the same choice in the same situation? And why the system hasn't been made tolerant for these erroneous choices? During the incident review I was telling you before, while the manager was talking about the nonsense actions with fingers, where they can be squeezed, I asked why it made sense for the employee to do so. And that senior manager actually, remained silent. So I took the chance to call back from his hiding place, the supervisor, and asked, hey, you know the guy, he is your team member, right? I mean, why do you think he did something so dangerous? And you know what he replied? He said, I don't know him very well, he's not in my team. What? It's not your team? Tell me more. And he said, oh, actually, he's a field technician. So why a field person was in your shop redressing a tool that is actually a maintenance task? And there, that manager woke up again and said, oh, we were short of maintenance personnel, and so we had to call a few field hands on site. Now, I don't think I need to tell you more about how this conversation ended up, right? What we need is to keep in mind that our guys are accountable for taking the best action with the information and the competence they have. But as leaders, we are accountable for the context that shapes those actions. Can you demand your people their best while stay vigilant for the challenge they face? A way to balance accountability is by start asking not who failed, but what failed. Start by questioning the system, processes, the condition first, and let's see what remains to hold people accountable for. You want people to pay attention, not discussion. But if they lose a hand, if they fall from height, if something crushed them, do you have the courage to tell them, hey, pay more attention next time? That's where we can make a real difference. Hold the system accountable first. And run operation where, when we fail, we do so in a way that is resilient and keeps everyone safe. So if today you are all in this forum with the collective idea and desire to change the way this industry manages people, keep in mind these three challenges. You need to have a plan for increasing your organization's ability to learn. You need to have a plan for dealing with the blaming disparity. You need to have a plan for balancing accountability. Our operation faces many unpredictable moments, but one thing we can control is how we protect our people. Use your human performance seatbelt, buckle up, and save lives.